Hello, welcome to Pull to Open, an ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who in random order. I'm Pete Paschal.
And I'm Chris Taylor, and we're a couple of journalists who've written quite a lot about Doctor Who, watched it even more, and really love to nerd out about it, especially when we're watching it in random order.
Oh yes, that's our thing. It's our lot in life. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing great. I just got my second shot, just to place this in time and space. I'm the end of the pandemic is approaching, and I am almost fully immune.
Awesome.
It's been a long year, and I'm looking forward to getting back out there.
Congratulations. Immune to viruses, both microscopic and man-sized.
Yes, appropriate for this week's show, which features microscopic killers. Once again, it's something we've covered before, but yeah,
true.
Yeah,
it should be a good one. It's funny. The randomizer has been, as listeners of the show know, we tune into the Doctor Who randomizer, and it blasts us around the show and picks the episodes for us. And it's been eerily. It seems to have a weird pattern to it of late.
It's super scary. I'm actually, I was sort of making jokes in previous week that I'm a little bit scared of the randomizer. Now I'm really scared of the randomizer.
Yeah.
For reasons that we will get to, it almost predicted a news event of the week.
Yes.
Bizarrely. I know that we're humans and we match patterns and we just see patterns in things that aren't there in random noise, but yeah, I think I've really seen it this week, and I'm a little disturbed about where the randomizer is going to take us next, and what big news event is it going to predict.
Yeah, well, it's been funny because I feel like how many episodes of Doctor Who feature alternate fascist Earth? It's probably not really that many, or even a fascist sort of society.
Yep.
And we got two in a row.
We've got two in a row. It was Inferno last week, the best-known Fascist Britain episode, and now perhaps a lesser-known fascist episode in The Pyramid of the End of the World and The Lie of the Land.
Yeah, very recent. The sort of two-parter Capaldi episode.
Capaldi, yeah, you just, shorten his name. He's just Capaldi.
Well, that's funny. When my son, he's 11 now, but now when he was younger, I think when Peter Capaldi was selected, that's how he would say it. It's like Pischetti. Capaldi.
I love it. That's his name now, as far as the show is concerned.
But yeah, like it jumps right into this jumps us right to another fascist Britain, more jackbooted thugs running around. Another, is who is on the side of the bad, who is on the side of the good, etc.
Yeah, and another story straight from Inferno, another story of scientists in a lab destroying the world through sheer arrogance or hangovers.
Pesky scientists, they gotta, we gotta get some cameras in there or something, because they're just off doing crazy things, and honestly, given what the world has seen in the real world, I feel like we're probably a hair's breadth away from doomsday at any particular time. This actual thing in this episode where there's a microbe that could get out and destroy everything, has actually come close to happening a couple of times.
Right. Keep that smallpox locked up, please, US and Russia. Yeah, but before we get into this, let's do a little housekeeping. We seem to have gone viral on TikTok again.
You betcha. So yes, for those of you familiar with the TikTok franchise, Pull to Open, this is the fuel for those TikToks that I'm enjoying. I'm enjoying making them. I'm enjoying seeing the audience comment on them. And it's even led to one of our TikTok fans to find us here on Apple Podcasts, if you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts. And we've got our first review.
I'm super excited about this because I've not heard this review. I've not read it. And Pete just told me about it this morning. And he's now going to read it to me live for my live Insta reaction to our very first Pull to Open review.
Yes. And before I do, I want to again remind everyone we are a podcast. In case you're encountering this on a web embed somewhere, please head over to your favorite podcast app, whether it's Google, Spotify, Apple, Overcast, or whatever you like. And please subscribe and go ahead and leave your own review. We really enjoy the 5-star reviews, but honestly, we'll take whatever you want to say, and we would love to hear what you think of the show, what you like, what you don't like, and just whatever your thoughts are. So
whatever you want to hear, we take requests.
So this one comes from Janice Online. I hope I'm getting that right. And it could be Jana is online. Oh, Jana is online. I get it. Janice. It's not Janice. Jana. Hi, Jana. Thank you for leaving your review. It says, just what I was looking for. That's the title. Yes. Found this podcast through TikTok, and I'm thoroughly impressed. As a Doctor Who lover, all I want to do is listen to some cool people talk about how cool, and sometimes how ridiculous, it is. So glad I came across this pod, and I'm excited for more. And so are we,
Oh,
Jenna.
my. Thank you, Jenna.
Yeah. Well, very, very kind of her to call us cool people, I got to say.
Yeah, cool people talking about cool stuff. That's what we are, Pete.
Yeah. Absolutely. Certainly
cool.
When I was growing up, I was regarded as very cool for liking the cool show Doctor Who. So this fits completely with my life choice.
Yeah.
And is a lot of validation that Jan has given me here.
I'm sure,
thanks for
yes.
listening.
I'm sure it was the same for you. All the cool kids on the playground were gathered in one corner talking about Doctor Who. That's definitely how it was for me.
Especially in Western Canada. But thank you so much for listening. Yeah, please tell your friends and certainly your Doctor Who friends about it. As soon as we get swag for the show, you get a free T-shirt, mug, or TARDIS key, whatever we end up making.
Pull to open would be a great thing to have in a T-shirt. To be honest, that's
100%.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Let's get to it.
It'd be like if you could actually pull it to open. That could be fun beachwear.
I've always wondered why that is on the front of the TARDIS, by the way, pull to it, like you don't know how to operate a door. For the 0.001% of you who've never opened doors before, really? Here's how it works.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, we don't have to get into it. He pushes to open every single time.
It's actually the ultimate Doctor Who joke. It's like the longest running gag in history. And also, he doesn't even use the sonic screwdriver to open the doors, which is another thing that the randomizer has shown us recently. Lots of sonic opening door scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the snapping of the fingers, but that's a little too dramatic. But yeah, like the pull to open. There is an episode later, I believe, when Eggleston started actually using the phone. They showed that little door for the phone in the front actually pulls.
Yep.
So if you want to get really nerdy about it, you could say it's accurate.
Yeah.
You do actually pull something to open.
You'd think that more people walking past the TARDIS in the junkyard might have tried that, but no, we don't even see it until New Who.
Yeah, it took something like 40 years. All right. Speaking of New Who, I think we
are the only podcast who takes all of Doctor Who in random order, and that means we take the rough with the smooth and the good with the bad. And we went from Inferno, which is widely regarded as one of the best episodes of Doctor Who, to The Pyramid to the End of the World / The Lie of the Land in the Peter Capaldi era, which is not one of the best episodes of Doctor Who.
To put it lightly, it's not regarded as such. Like, we'll get to our verdict, but yes.
But what we should tackle first is, so this is widely thought of as part of the Monks trilogy, with the episode that precedes it, which is called Extremis. And I know that Who nerds are probably... there are definitely some Who nerds out there listening to us right now and shaking their little fists saying, why didn't you include Extremis? And that is, I think, another reason why the randomizer brought us here is it's sort of exposing my most difficult call when I was originally making this spreadsheet. and I sort of, had to decide what was a Who story and what wasn't. Then I ran it past you, Pete, and I think you had a few suggestions, like making Mission to the Unknown part of the Dalek Master Plan. We combined those. But there are these calls you have to make. If we're watching a singular story, what counts as that? And there are many occasions where stories sort of bleed into each other, but they don't really, we never really think of them as Who fans as singular stories. And Extremis, I mean, yes, it is a trilogy. It's probably the only trilogy in Who history where each episode is written by someone different. Moffat had a hand in the second one, but otherwise it's sort of, it's Moffat, and then Toby Whitehouse does the last one, and I forget the name of the writer who does Pyramid. But it's sort of, it's almost like this Exquisite Corpse game where you just sort of write your episode, you fold a piece of paper over. Extremis is really self-contained. Really self-contained. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's all, a simulation. The Doctor discovers he's part of the simulation. Anyone who reads the Extremis document discovers they're part of the simulation. They all kill themselves. I think it would have been super weird, by the way, had we included it. The randomizer took us here. And then, because there's the scene in Extremis where everyone at CERN, the lab, realizes that they just say the same random number. If they're asked for a random number, because computers can't simulate randomness, and that's, ties into the fact that we use random.org, which uses atmospheric noise to choose our random episode of Doctor Who. So that would have been super creepy. But I gotta be honest.
Commenting on randomness, that's right.
Yeah, maybe we should try that whenever we get to Extremis, Pete. We'll just sort of say random numbers on it. But I got to be honest, the main reason why I was against linking the trilogy as a single story, apart from the fact that it doesn't seem to be necessary from story purposes, is I love Extremis. I think it's a great sort of bottle episode in many ways. It's self-contained. It's one of those Moffat classics, like Heaven Sent, like Listen. It's self-contained around a wonderful idea, and it's the thing he does best. And I just wanted to not connect it to these other two, which are thoroughly disappointing. But what do you think, Pete? Was that the right call?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of see it both ways, in that I think ultimately it probably is, though. Seeing it that way, I might even separate all three of them. In that it's almost like the Matrix movies, like, 'cause I think,
good analogy.
Generally, everyone knows the Matrix is a classic, and the sequels weren't so great. And this might be not the perfect analogy, because I think the Matrix sequels, since they were made back to back and are very connected, tend to get lumped together, and rightly so. And so here, I think there's that elements of that. I mean, it's clearly there's more of a. I mean, they're all cliffhangers, or the first two are cliffhangers, but the second one even more so. The first one's kind of like what happens next, and the second one you're like, well, you got to fix this. And so, I feel like maybe that I could have gone either way. I think that ultimately, I think this is the right call, because, to your point, to go into just the pyramid at the end of the world, I think there's certain things that sort of get paid off, and particularly with the monks later, that you need that context to really fully analyze the story. So I think this was it was either separate them all or do it the way we did it. And I'm glad we're doing it the way we did it for the first reason you mentioned, which is that we don't have to do this 3 times. Let's just get these last 2 out of the way.
Yeah, I think Extremis sort of feels more like a prequel. And then the other two, definitely Lie of the Land has to resolve the fact that the monks take over the world. The evil plan succeeds. Sorry to get ahead of ourselves by, sort of spoiling the plot. But perhaps we should get into our regular feature that we've started doing at the beginning of every show, TLDW, where one of us recaps in limited amount of time the entire story that we will be discussing for the rest of the show. And this week it's the turn of Pete Pachal at the TARDIS controls, and we've decided that for New Who episodes, you get 1 minute per episode to recap the story. So Pete, you have 2 minutes.
I'm not sure if that's generous or not. I just hope I don't make up entire scenes that didn't happen like I did last time. So, first
that would be entirely appropriate, actually. Yeah. Just make it fake news central. Give us an entirely fake story. All right, so 2 minutes. I'll give you a time check.
Anything. I'm gonna just make sure I'm not looking at anything. I'm going to a random tab.
Yeah, we're doing this entirely live.
No notes. Everything's closed. Completely from memory. Okay, here we go.
All right, I'll give you time checks at every 30 seconds, and go.
All right, there's previously on, which references Bill's date from the last episode. What's her name? Penny? I forget her name. Patty? One of her girlfriend. They're going back. They're laughing about what happened in the simulation that Bill was told about. And she said, the Pope walked into my apartment, and then suddenly UN troops walk into her apartment and essentially tell her, we need you now, and they take her to the plane that we've seen before, which is the plane of the president of the world. They get the doctor to come. They take this TARDIS out of the school, and they realize there's a pyramid. There's a pyramid that is that has just appeared out of nowhere, and it's 4,000 years old, but it's in the middle of a conflict zone in a fictional country called Turkmenistan or something like that. And so there's 3 armies. It looks like the end of the world is going to happen here. The oh my God, the monks. It's about the monks are behind this. The monks that we saw, and they're here to conquer the world, but they have to be asked. They have to be asked to conquer the world, which is weird. So the doctor's trying to figure out why here, why now. Well, first of all, there's this lab where a microbe was going to destroy the world, and the whole thing with the UN conflict zone was a mislead. And so the doctor figures that out, but there's one big thing he forgot, which is that he's blind, and so he can't get out of the lab because there's a combination lock. So Bill asks the monks to save him, thus giving them essentially the keys to the world. So what they do is they take over the world with brainwaves. They brainwash everybody into thinking they've been there forever, since the dawn of time, but really they've only been there 6 months, and they use all these statues to subjugate the population. But the doctor leads a rebellion, forces them off the planet by using Bill's memory of her mother, the one memory of the photo.
Wow. That was impressive, Pete. You did it just at the buzzer. You got to Bill's mother, which is really the end.
I was like, so like, oh my God, I did a minute and a half on the first one, and I was like, how do I cram everything into the last 30 seconds? And I think I got most of the key points. So,
that was very Doctor Who like, the way that the show will often sort of just wrap everything up in the last 5 minutes. I think that was very appropriate. I love it.
A lot of setup, rushed ending.
Yeah. There was about 20 seconds on Bill's date, which maybe.
Yeah, there was. I don't know. I was just like, okay, I'm spending too much. This reminds me of a time I was trying to explain Batman Begins to someone, and I went into a lot of him getting into fights overseas when they were like, "When's Batman show up?" And I was like, "Oh, okay."
I love it though, because it is. You're basically by focusing on the date, you're referencing the fact that they're taking the best joke in extremis, which is the Pope showing up in the middle of Bill's date with Penny, who is obviously, Penny is someone very nervous, hasn't necessarily dated a girl before, and it's sort of perhaps she's Catholic, perhaps she's religious, and then the fact that the Pope shows up in the bedroom in the middle of the date is just, I think, one of the funniest things I've seen ever in the history of Doctor Who. It's played so perfectly, and after watching Pyramid and Lie of the Land, with my wife, she didn't remember if she'd seen Extremis, so we went back to the beginning to watch it. But also because I wanted to watch that joke again, because it's just the comic timing is brilliant. And it's sort of the first big sin of Pyramid is the fact that they just replicate the joke. And it's kind of funny the second time round, but not really.
Yeah, it's almost like the whole episode is a bit Cribs notes, of a lot of things. But in particular, they just kind of do the same thing again. And it's not, like you say, it doesn't have that religious sin overtone. Like what's going on here? Like what is the word? Like what is the number one person you don't want to show up right now from the entire world? And is it the Pope? Oh wow, And so that is completely lost. It's just referencing really, and just kind of doing it again out of a. It's a bit funny, but it's not. It doesn't quite work the same way. So again, like like you say, with the whole the sequel that doesn't work, the Matrix sequel that doesn't work. You're doing this, but it's like, it just doesn't feel like
it's a prime example. And so the Pope is the Pope. Like the Pope is instantly recognizable no matter who you put in the costume. The UN Secretary General, not so much.
Right.
But speaking of real people, we should get to the one reason why that this is super spooky. The choice that the randomizer made here. Because when the monks take over Earth, they broadcast lots of images of themselves inserted into world history. Themselves with Einstein, themselves with MLK, and so on and so on. And one of them is a picture of the Queen and Prince Philip. And this is the only episode of Doctor Who to ever feature a photograph of Prince Philip, who sadly passed away at the age of 99. Right. Just yesterday. It was the day before we recorded the show, and the day that I was watching it. So that was super bizarre. And a little spooky. Like, of all the 297 stories we could have picked, the randomizer takes us to one where, the only one feature Prince Philip, and then he dies. So, yeah, I'm a little worried about where we're going next, I've got to say.
Yeah, so to be honest with you, I completely missed the photo because I feel like by the end, and this is really kind of happens towards the end when they're in the final sort of fake news central in the middle of the pyramid. I don't know. I was just so over it, and I was just kind of like not even really paying attention. Like I feel like, I was paying attention, but I wasn't like riveted to the point where I'm like, oh wow, look at all this, oh my god, Mount Everest and Martin Luther King, and they're all like, you know what I mean? Like at this point I'm like, okay, I get it, and I kind of want the show to be over, and I was barely like recognizing anyone because I wasn't even really like, I get it, they're in world history, and we're gonna stop that now. So when does it happen? Is it like right away? Is it sort of in the middle? Is there any sort of reference beyond just here's a photo?
Yeah, it's just you're seeing many photos on the screen at the same time, so it's definitely a blink and you miss it thing. It's also, one photo that definitely jumps out at you is Donald Trump. This is the first one of the first episodes to be filmed, after he'd been elected, I think, but just before he actually took office. So it's kind of oddly prescient in a number of ways. It's the first reference probably to him, because the UN Secretary General mentions the president. He's like, we're looking for the president. Bill says, I've got nothing to do with him. I wouldn't even have voted for him. He's orange.
Right.
She doesn't say his name. The first time Trump's name is actually used in Doctor Who is in Arachnids in the UK, in Jodie Whittaker's first season.
I guess this was when
hinted that Trump.
Yeah, that was the direct reference, but the I guess the orange thing wasn't tired by then. Like I feel like orange was it's obviously a cheap kind of.
It is a very cheap shot, and the fact that Bill uses it is a little weird. But yeah, it's we think of it as a cheap shot now. I think quite obviously because years of liberal criticism on Twitter was met by a lot of conservative criticism of the liberal criticism, saying, "Oh, all you're saying is Orange Man bad," right? So we kind of stopped pointing out that he's orange. But yeah, his photo is one that jumps out. Otherwise, they're just sort of a mishmash of black and white photos from history.
Yeah, I think I saw Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
And
Einstein's in there.
Definitely saw Einstein. Oh, and Churchill. That was interesting. Like I didn't quite catch it, but as I had read that they didn't use the actor who had been Churchill from the Matt Smith era, and I wonder if that was because they couldn't sort of you'd obviously have to get the actor to consent, and maybe they just didn't have the resources or the time to kind of give him a call, give his agent. Yeah. I'm sure he would have done it, but it's like,
or maybe it's fake news central. So that's how the monks inserted this fake picture of Churchill throughout history, and he actually did look like how he looked in Victory of the Daleks. But
the monks went to central casting. In other words, got the real Churchill.
Got this weird babyface guy.
I like that. I like that the irony, the meta irony there.
It was the one residue that was left when they exited our imaginations. Yeah, I love it. But yeah, Prince Philip is in there, and this comes to us straight after a show, Inferno, in which we're told that the entire royal family is killed. So if you, as the randomizer, were trying to signal that a member of the royal family was going to die, these are the shows you would pick. So yeah, I'm kind of hoping that the next episode number is going to like reveal lottery numbers or something, and we could just
this is very like it's almost Lost level decoding we could do here. I feel like we're getting it from atmospheric noise, right? Could the Doctor be trying to get us a signal through disturbances in the atmosphere that we're picking up as random garbage, but he really wants us to watch these episodes in a certain order?
Well, Doctor, if you're out there, first of all, please leave us a review.
Subscribe to us on TikTok.
Secondly, come be a guest on the show. We'd love to have you on. We've got many questions to ask. We'd love to do your first extensive interview with humanity. I know you're a bit sort of camera shy, but
I'd love to see how he does if we quiz him on trivia on the show. I wonder if he totally fail. Speaking of trivia on the show, the pyramid at the end of the world is an interesting little tidbit, is that it is the longest word count of a Doctor Who episode title.
Yes.
So it's 8 words. It isn't the longest character count, which is the Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. But it's a neat little bit of trivia. And also, I guess the title is supposedly a reference to the restaurant at the end of the universe, potentially. I just read that on a write-up of the show. I'm not sure if that's a Moffat thing or the writer. Who was the other writer? I keep forgetting. You didn't. It's like Peter something. Let me actually look it up right now.
Yeah,
Peter Harness.
Yes. I was hoping there was some write-up somewhere of the story behind the scenes of how this got rewritten, how Moffat's name got added. Because, of course, as the showrunner, he goes through all the scripts with a pretty heavy pen. But it kind of feels like a Moffat episode, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It kind of feels like a bad Moffat episode. Moffat is running on fumes at the end of his run. It's his last season. And he's just sort of jamming so many ideas in here. And that's main reason why Pyramid doesn't work, is that so many ideas are jammed in shoulder to shoulder, and not enough effort is made to make any of them sort of do the logical leap where we believe it. Like there is almost nothing in this episode that I believed. And let's start with the end of the world part. The geopolitical situation apparently is that Russia, China, and the US are all in this one country,
Turkmenistan. Yeah.
Turkmenistan.
This is one of these irritating things about a lot of shows lately, and I don't know if it's political correctness or they simply just have nothing to say about the world today. But this idea of like, let's make up a country that kind of sounds real. And this is not new. I mean, it's been going on. I think I remember I used to read DC Comics, and they had a Middle Eastern country called Qurak.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Like, so this is a common thing. It's like generic country in trouble spot in the world, which I just find really irritating. I mean, I get why you're kind of doing it, but it's so random, and it just sort of weakens whatever you're trying to say, I think, if you're even in fact trying to say anything. And I get maybe they didn't go into this episode trying to say anything about geopolitics or just conflict today, but that also just means like, okay, well, I see like sort of my emotional and my real world stakes are going to be sort of on a different plane now. It's almost like you might as well say it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Like.
Well, at least that you're able to make that logical leap, because of course that could happen in a galaxy far, far away. There are so many stories and potential worlds and potential alien races. You can sort of sit back and believe it. But the problem with this is it's too close to home. It falls into a geopolitical uncanny valley, if you will. Mm-hmm. If the US, China, and Russia were all in some foreign country, in some region of the world, like say Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan, any of the countries it's supposed to represent, we would be terrified. We would know about it. There would be a reason for them to all be there. First of all, some resource they were all fighting over. Secondly,
or some humanitarian crisis or whatever.
We'd be at DEFCON 2. I mean, the world would be in panic. It's something that Bill and Penny might sort of mention on their date.
You'd think, right? There'd be like a newspaper maybe in the background about like tensions rise in Southeast Asia or the Middle East or wherever it happens to be.
Wherever it's supposed to be. And I remember this was the main thing that stopped me. And maybe I'm just too much of a politics nerd, and I noticed this sort of stuff. But I think it stopped a lot of people. It's the first thing that stopped me the first time around. And just the fact that, I mean, come on, you're Doctor Who, you're kind of inherently small scale. You don't have the budget to really give us a realistic feel of the three largest armies in the world in the same country. Like that scene, there's a scene where the TARDIS lands around a Russian soldier, right? And you think it's just a Russian soldier on the phone, and the TARDIS lands around it. No, this turns out to be the commander of the entire Russian army.
Right, yeah. And like,
I don't believe it.
And like, there's so much of like these kind of things in this whole situation that are kind of just glossed over. And like I get it's TV, and there's budgets and there's pacing, and you don't want to stop and explain every little thing. But it's still like, if I'm watching it thinking like, wait a minute, didn't his second in command do so? Didn't someone call somebody? And like, shouldn't this have been more of a bigger deal in that immediate place than it's being portrayed as? It's just, there's too many of these moments where I'm just like, I don't know if that would happen or work. Or
the chain of command is super confusing, and this is another weird reason why it's weird the randomizer brought us here. Is we recently went to Dark Water / Death in Heaven, where the Doctor becomes president of the world. He gets his plane, Boat One, and it's revealed that there's this emergency protocol where if there's an alien invasion, in that case Cybermen, he gets to be president of the world, which is great.
Finally, everybody wised up.
Yeah, which totally, I'd vote for the Doctor, but then first of all he accepts it, which isn't very Doctor-like. But secondly, then in this episode, we see him be president of the world again, but then nobody listens to him. Like when they surrender to the monks, first of all, the UN Secretary General surrenders to the monk, and the Doctor's literally saying no. If he's president of the world, shouldn't the Secretary General listen to him?
Doesn't he have to listen to him?
Yeah,
they kind of forget about their own hierarchy.
And where are the national leaders in this? You'd think the president of the US would want to say, even if he is orange. And apparently, according to just to confuse things geopolitically even further, reportedly the original version of the scripted pyramid had an obvious version of Trump a version of Kim Jong-un, which is sort of weird.
Yeah.
Why would the North Korean army be in Central Asia? And Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition at the time, leader of the British Labour Party, who I guess, he got his closest to being Prime Minister in 2017 during that general election where, we got close to a hung parliament, but kind of a weird choice. And just sort of to have... It could have been even worse, I guess is what I'm saying here. It could have been a lot worse with those guys as kind of the Three Stooges of the show. It could have been really confused. And
well, at least I think we would have gotten something more memorable than these three sort of hapless quasi-military people. And they're just not at all memorable.
Yeah.
And so even the UN Secretary General, and they sort of all end up surrendering to the monks and getting sort of vaporized... which, you kind of like, oh, okay. It's too bad. Like, you don't really feel it. And, you're just constantly like, what are you doing? Why aren't you listening to the doctor? You're just not really with it at any particular point.
And it might work if it was played as comedy. If it was like played very much like the movie Mars Attacks,
right.
It's kind of what this reminds me of. But it's definitely not played that way. It's played as if it's deathly serious.
Yeah. Were you ever thinking, by the way, like, where's Unit?
Yes. And they mention Unit. By the way, no 0 stars to whoever does the subtitles on HBO Max. Because there's one I always watch with the subtitles on, and there's one reference to the doctor says something about I believe all this closed circuit cameras or whatever are being monitored, being routed through Unit HQ. So there's one reference to Unit in the show.
Did you?
But it comes up as
you always watch with the subtitles on.
I do.
Oh, Chris. Okay, wait a minute. We have to pause for a second because I am now seeing we are looking at each other or listening to each other across a divide, which separates so many people in this world.
Yeah.
I'm so anti-subtitle unless it's a foreign language film. Like my kids actually like it, and I feel like it's a generational thing.
I think it is. Yes, it is a generational thing.
But we're like of the same generation. We're both Xers, right?
That is true. Yes, and you're younger than me, in fact, so I shouldn't be like this. But I don't know. It kind of makes it like a comic book for me, and I like comic books.
Huh,
so
okay.
But my wife is on your side. She totally hates it with the subtitles on. She says it keeps distracting her eyes, like she wants to watch the show, and her eyes keep getting drawn to the subtitles.
Right.
Anyway, the subtitle in this
Sorry
part.
About that. Sorry about that phrase. It just suddenly like, wait a minute, something. My spider sense went off massively, and I had to stop the show for a second.
This is good because
it out,
I do need at some point to write, and I do want to write at some point on Mashable a story about this generational divide of having the subtitles on versus not. But yeah, it says in the subtitles, one thing you notice when you always have them on, there are a lot of mistakes, and it says something like UN8 HQ, and I buried my head in my hands at that point. I was like, oh, subtitle writer, is Unit so alien to you? Have we forgotten how many times they saved the world?
I think that guy and the guy who writes episode summaries on Netflix might be the same person.
Yes, they're related.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Unit's mentioned, but they're not there. I would love to have Unit to been here. I think this shows why Unit existed in the first place, because it's removed enough from the real world, but it feels real worldy.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way they wrote it, where there's sort of people in the UN sort of all have to die. Maybe that's ostensibly the reason it's not Unit, because then it's like, oh, do we have to then kill off Kate Stewart or whoever? Could they write it in a way that doesn't do that? Maybe that's why. But what ultimately happens is, like, again, everything's not really memorable and a little bit ridiculous and incomprehensible. Because when you're playing with Unit, when you have that, you know, it's not it's a real organization within Doctor Who, but it's fictional, so you can kind of play with standards and expectations to a certain extent with a sort of a wider tolerance. Whereas when you go with the UN and you're trying to do something a little more quote unquote realistic, you're, as a viewer, your suspension of disbelief meter, it's just it gets triggered a little. You get out of it too quickly. And
this episode needed more space to breathe. We needed to hear more about the lab that ultimately destroys the world or is threatening to destroy the world. And we should have focused on that. And maybe this is, part of what the randomizer is telling us here is that Inferno, which focused so much on the lab that is destroying the world and gave us this wonderful atmospheric entire focus on the lab and Unit is there, was a much better experience than this, with its misdirection, or the armies at the end of the world. Maybe the randomizer is telling us that more budget doesn't always equal better show.
Oh, absolutely. They're definitely similarly themed, similarly plotted in some ways. Though, like Inferno, I think because it does spend so much time in the lab, and we get to know the characters, the politics. There's a countdown. There's a literal countdown. This one there is too, but I mean, Inferno just feels like it's a potboiler. Like you're really like you feeling the pressure build and the suspense build, and here you're just kind of like really unsure like where it's even going at certain times and why you should care. I think that's the main thing.
Which is a problem with the Moffat era in general, I think.
Yes.
And before we leave the three armies fighting, I think that I have to mention the most groan-worthy line in the entire story for me was when they all, the Chinese, American, Russian military leaders all shake hands and agree to stop fighting because hopefully that'll make the monks say that the world isn't going to end anymore. And they look at the Doctor and they say, "What do you say, Doctor? Did we just give peace a chance?"
Oh, yeah. That's what the discontinuity guide would call a dialogue disaster.
Agreed.
Yeah, I completely agree that it is. It's pretty lousy. I think it's partly because that, honestly, I hate to slam on anyone in particular, but that the guy who does the American general is very, of all the forgettable people, he's probably the most forgettable.
Doctor Who's just really bad at Americans. This is definitely what we're learning with the randomizer.
Yeah, generally. I have to think back to Van Staten, who I thought was actually quite good. But
True.
Back to this. So one of the things that I think this particular storyline, why it's forgettable in the sort of grandness of Doctor Who, is the monks.
Yes.
I feel very strongly the monks are pretty weak sauce as monsters. They look like corpses for this totally nonsensical reason of like they think people are going to destroy themselves, so they decided to adopt human form as corpses. Okay, that's weird. And it's really like you don't even really need an in-universe. This is one of those things where the in-universe reason makes the out-universe reason more obvious. And like, why don't you just say they'd adopted this to scare people? So that kids would hide behind the sofa. Like, I mean, why don't you just say that? Because that's clearly what you did for the show. It's just they're a jump scare monster.
Yeah. Just own it.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, and then once you get past like their appearance, like, why are they scary? Like, what do they do to you? And I guess, they have like, they're kind of like the Silence. They have this sort of general lightning bolt thing they fire, and you see that more in the second episode. And I guess, if they can touch you and vaporize you, and though that's not clear if that's innate to every monk or if that's the thing with the whole consent to have them rule you thing. But it's just, it's kind of like, well, what are you going to do to me other than general alien stuff, right? Like, and I feel like, I don't. It's not like Doctor Who has to be like The Boys, where Homelander can vaporize people with his eyes, and it's horrific. Although I kind of wouldn't mind seeing that. But it's like they're just, I don't know. They're just not intimidating at all. Like in the way, say, Daleks and Cybermen, where even though those are sort of generic ray weapons, like you kind of get it, like why you should run from those things. Whereas the monks are just lame.
They're lame, and the concept behind them is lame, and sort of everything about them is lame. From the fact that they they kind of look like Emperor Palpatine and from Star Wars, and they have the same Force lightning power apparently. So they're kind of a copy. Except their robes are red, although Palpatine's robes were red in the prequels.
Yeah, why are you wearing torn robes? I mean, like, what is this? And then they call themselves the monks. I mean, I don't know if they call themselves that. Actually, I'm not sure if they ever do. But like, what are your names? Like, we're just called the monks. Like, that's what kind of name is that?
It's funny, isn't it? The Primords also not named in
Right.
Inferno were scarier, even though they cost £2.75p to put their costume together, and the monks are just now. First of all, I have to pull you back on the silence thing. Did you not like the silence?
No, don't get me wrong. I feel like the silence, their innate ability to make people forget about them was very interesting. It kind of doesn't quite work the way it's made to work in the show. But once you get past that a little bit, and once you're kind of dealing with them physically, I feel like they're a paper tiger, right? Like, well, what are you going to do to me now that I'm looking right at you? Like, and they sort of had lightning, but they never really use it unless. Anyway, I think I probably had more of an issue with the sort of action sequences of that particular storyline than the silence themselves. So I think the monks fail on that level as well, but they also fail on this bigger meta level of like, what are your motivations even? Because it's never really quite comprehensible why you're doing any of this and the rules that govern it in the first place.
Yeah, I think the silence is the right comparison to draw. First of all, I think the silence totally worked, and I loved the resolution of that, the way the Doctor made them, totally accessible to humanity's subconscious via the moon landing.
Right.
I think
was
just a brilliant Moffat invention, as opposed to this, which is just sort of they feel like silence light, and they have kind of the same noise and the same sort of head twistingness, and except it's super distracting. That apparently one of the things about the monks is that they're badly lip synced.
Right.
They're sort of like it feels like an Asian movie from the 60s, like a kung fu film, where they just, the lip syncing is all out of whack, except it's deliberate. Like, they just open their mouths a lot and words tumble out, and you're sort of trying, your brain goes to trying to match it up with their mouth movements, and it doesn't work.
Which I guess was supposed to be like I get that's what they were going for. Like, this is weird, and we're supposed to be put off by it. But again, it's one of those things that in practice it just takes you out of the show. Like, you're just kind of like, oh, okay, and then you actually start to think. Even if you start to think a little bit, like, well, why are they moving their mouths at all? Like, I mean, why aren't they just thinking this stuff?
So my working
there's no
theory,
real reason for it.
Yeah, my working theory with the monks in general. This is my headcanon on them. It's the only way to make them work, as far as I'm concerned. Is they're just galactic assholes. They just the way that they conquer a race. They go around the galaxy and they come along and they say, "Oh, you have to consent." We've built at great expense. We've built this vast simulation of your entire species, and we can tell that you're about to destroy yourselves. But we're not going to tell you how. You just have to consent to love us. And if you're only pretending to love us, we're going to destroy you. So first of all, I mean, it's kind of an interesting commentary on the concept of consent, which is an interesting time to do it. Like, this right at the beginning of Me Too and the whole discussion about consent. And this is like, they haven't got the concept. But if they're just being assholes about it, like, no, you have to consent to us in a way that we're not telling you.
Well, they're complete assholes about it, because they even they say you have to consent. The UN Secretary General says, "Okay, I will," and then the monk in front of him says, "Oh, but you know what? Now that you've said that, if it's impure, you're going to die." And it's like, well, wait a minute. You didn't tell me that rule.
Yeah.
Before I said, I didn't agree to, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's such a jerky move, and he vaporizes the guy. Like, what?
they say
cool.
that what they want is they want to rule through love because it's more efficient. I don't think they really get the concept of love.
Right.
Like,
yeah. Well, this is where again, like I would disagree with you in that it's interesting commentary on consent. I think they're kind of trying to twist the word, and it's a little resonant because it gets you to think about it, I guess. But I don't think the show has anything interesting to say about it. It's like pseudo commentary, right? Like, it's like it's consent and it's love and it's strategy. It's fake because it's strategy, and it just doesn't make any sense. And and ultimately, like, they end up leaving because they're the doctor dismisses them as dictators. Like, it's so weird. Like, the doctor hasn't encountered them before, but the master has. So that's actually one of the sort of better sequences and bits of dialogue in the second episode in The Lie of the Land, where he's getting intel from Missy on who these guys are, and they talk about that they just go from planet to planet and they pull this shit, and it's like, okay, well, that, and then they leave at the end, and so it's like they're here and they're not here. The doctor hasn't seen them before, and hopefully we'll never see them again. But it's like, well, so there's these conquerors that we've just are out there and no one's seen them. At least it led to some fun exchanges from Missy, but it's just so random.
Well, you're getting at one of my big problems with Doctor Who in general is that there's not enough reuse of monsters. Like, there are all these intergalactic conquerors who we see once and then never appear again. You'd think might have a better hit rate. They might be a little bit more successful, and maybe we could see them more than once. Like, it's not necessary to reinvent the wheel for every damn episode. Which is sort of what's happening here.
Yeah, exactly. Bring the pteroleptals back for a hot minute. Bring those. What were those guys? The Cryons, or like they were in the Android invasion. I forget what the Kirags. I don't know. Everything started with the K back then. But,
we could probably just throw random symbols together and we would actually hit on a Doctor Who monster that already exists. There are so many of them.
The Nestacoos.
Yeah, just to close the loop on the consent thing, is ultimately, so Bill does consent on behalf of the human race.
Right.
Because she wants to say that the Doctor, so then that's pure, but that's love for the Doctor, not love for the monks. And I just don't get how this would work. Like, you land on our planet, you neg us by saying we all look like corpses, so you're going to look corpse-like yourself and totally scary. Then you say we have to love you or you're going to vaporize us. Like, when does this actually work? When do people actually fall in love with the monks? I don't get that.
Yeah.
How does it happen? Maybe on a planet where they do all look like corpses and they're like, ooh, super sexy monks. But yeah, it just doesn't seem to work.
Well, and they talk about how it's inefficient, yet they build these statues and they enlist a fascist army, a secret police. That sounds pretty hard. Like, that's a lot of bureaucracy you're doing and setting up on 1984 type broadcasts. I mean, you're doing a lot to, like, I thought the whole idea of the love thing, it was low maintenance.
Absolutely. And so we'll get to fascist Britain in a bit, but just to finish with Pyramid at the End of the World, let's talk about the lab situation. The lab that does actually end the world because one guy had a hangover and one woman forgot or lost her reading glasses or got them crushed, and apparently did not, like most of us who wear reading glasses, have 15 million pairs of reading glasses just stashed everywhere, because that's what you do when you have reading glasses. You buy lots of cheap pairs, you keep a few at work, a few in your home office, a few in your den by your pile of books, a few by the nightstand. But no, the world dies because this one scientist has her reading glasses crushed in her bag because she was trying to hold the door open with her bag when she gets to the car. Like, all of this requires more things to make sense. And I get what they were going for there. Like, the script was going for this sort of, for want of a nail, kind of situation. Like the world ends because one pair of reading glasses was crushed. But then it's all about her colleague getting hungover because he was drinking the night before, and he wants to sleep under his desk, and he puts a decimal point in the wrong place. Like, I don't believe that for 1 second.
See, I do. I got to tell you, I actually think this is a little more realistic, probably, than you would think. I don't know. The more I have, and this might be just a life thing, where the more life experience you have, the more jobs you have, the further you get in a career, and I think you probably share this anyway, is that you realize everyone is just kind of winging it with whatever they're doing, and the things that seem like institutions that are propped up and very resilient really are just people, and everyone is stressed out and just kind of doing the best they can. So
yes,
I kind of get that. That said, I think if part of your point is that, dangerous things usually have more checks than that, yes, absolutely. Though I always sort of think back to the 90s where NASA and JPL were trying to save money.
Yes.
And there was I forget what it was. It was some Mars rover or probe that was supposed to land, and it ended up crashing into Mars, and it was because someone forgot to convert kilometers to miles or back the other way.
I think it was even more granular than that. I think it was inches to centimeters.
Yeah, it was just some silly conversion thing. So this kind of thing does happen. I mean, having, you and I mostly work at websites and media companies, and those often sometimes seem like, very resilient to, I mean, I don't know if they seem resilient, but they seem more institutional, maybe less so today. But I remember when I was first starting out, realizing behind the scenes, it's just one guy hitting publish, and literally you can move change a word and do whatever you want, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, obituaries accidentally get published with, HTK and all of that stuff. Yeah, no, I get that. And, to quote the immortal William Golding on Hollywood, nobody knows anything. I get that. But I think that, again, this is the problem with jamming too many things into the episode. If you're going to do the whole for want of a nail thing, you've got to spend more time on it. And, it's only through, really watching and pausing the episode do you see the decimal point in the wrong place.
Right.
And it sort of has to be explained off camera, by the scientist to the doctor when he's flirting with her, to really grasp what's going on there. It needed more time to focus on it. Yeah, I get that mistakes are made, and I with more time, I totally would have bought the idea that the world can be ended by a GM bacteria because a decimal point would put it in the wrong place. But you really need to sell that.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's not fleshed out enough.
Yeah.
One thing I did like about the storyline in this, I actually think it picked up a bit when we got to the lab part, and I thought the whole investigation to find out when they realize it's a mislead, what is being misled to, and it's done pretty quickly. But I thought the doctor's idea of shutting down cameras and then seeing which ones come back on was pretty clever.
Yes.
On a couple, even though it kind of doesn't quite work because the monks seem are a little too godlike in their abilities.
Yes.
That I do like that they're kind of weakened a little bit. They're humanized by they're actually using our own technology to observe, which makes them, a little bit less godlike, which was good, but it's a little counteracting other things because they really are kind of godlike because they end up giving the doctor his sight back with no visible mechanism by which to do that. Do you think that would require some surgery or something?
Well, the one thing we know about the monks, Pete, is that they're efficient. They like efficiency. So what's more efficient than using our own closed-circuit cameras against us? Yeah, and I sort of like the bit where the Doctor puts all of the, world's secret information online.
Well,
That feels like a very Doctorish thing to do.
I
If
would have liked
if
that
only
more.
because
Yeah.
I love hearing Peter Capaldi say the word Google, which he
Yes.
also does in the oh gosh, what's the base under siege one in the previous season.
Oh, was that
Where
the Christmas episode?
No,
Or
it's the bit where he explains the bootstrap paradox, and then he says the bootstrap paradox. Google it.
oh
And
yes,
that was
yes.
such an
Okay.
iconic line that
think
my
that was
wife and I
the late
still
one.
say that to each other. We still say, if one of us is trying to use the other as Google, which happens a lot, we'll just say Google it.
Add a little Scottish burn. 100%. Yeah, he's no one says Google quite like Capaldi. So I like the twist. My problem with it is that it's not nearly as impactful as it should be. Like, it sounds cool. Like, oh, you just put all the intel documents online. That's really ballsy. That's amazing. Except you
Yeah.
don't see any other secondary consequence of that. And certainly, of course, the story's not about that. But if you're not going to do that, then it's less cool.
Yeah.
At least when they did that in the Marvel universe. So like when they did in Captain America: Civil War, they put all the Shield and Hydra intel out publicly online as well. But that actually leads to Shield no longer being an organization. Like, it actually has long consequences for that universe, which
Yeah.
makes that move really, really cool. In this case, it's just kind of forgotten about right away.
Well, Doctor Who does that, right? And it's not just, it's not just that at the end of this story that the human race forgets that it was just invaded by aliens. It's every story the human race just forgets. And
Yes
Marvel
and no, but anyway, go on.
Marvel is like out in front of the pack, and it's doing this with Falcon and Winter Soldier as well, of really exploring the implications of its sort of sci-fi reset buttons. Like they reset the Thanos snap, but half the world's population came back, and now you have to deal with the consequences of that. And there's a whole terrorist organization because of it. And I love what they're doing with sort of second order effects. Doctor Who could do that. It has the intelligence to do that, but it doesn't. It hits the reset button every time. That's something I'd love to see change in Doctor Who's future.
Well, I think you're being a little too hard on Who, and especially New Who, because I feel like it didn't do that for a long. I felt like it actually did make all these things part of the same universe under Davies, and to some extent that extended into Moffat for a while. And this really gets at the heart of. Well, not necessarily the heart, but one of the main reasons why I don't really like the Moffat era as much, even though I like many of the stories, is that he is so liberal with that reset button. Yeah. And at the end, I just find it like, it's completely, it's not even explicitly reset, like there's not like time has been rewound like in, say, Last of the Time Lords. He just kind of glosses over like the lack of global memory, and it's kind of funny, but it's like, and I'm not saying I want the show to take itself like really seriously about it. All this stuff, they shouldn't, and stories should just do what they want. But this to longtime fans who want all of these adventures to be in the same universe. It's just gets infuriating after a while. Like, you need to have something carry over, otherwise, why is it still the same show? Like, why not just reboot it entirely?
Yeah, I agree, and like I say, I hope that we're going to see more of that as the audience matures, as people become more sophisticated in future seasons of Doctor Who. But this is a good point to segue into the Lie of the Land, which is which I actually liked a lot more the second time around. I don't know, did you have a better read on it? Like, I liked it more than Pyramid.
I think there's more to like about Lie of the Land, and you can, if you, again, managing your expectations, you can have fun with the fun that they're having, right? Like, they actually, it opens really strongly, I thought, with sort of the monks' alt history. And I think they're consciously doing this. Like, I know we've just been complaining about the monks looking like corpses, but it's honestly just so silly to see these corpses with the fish crawling out of the ocean and people in history like these great dead bodies were helping us the whole time, and it's such absurd imagery. They're clearly having fun with it. I thought that actually worked really well.
It definitely is, like Inferno, where a fascist Britain was definitely fun for people on the set, like the Brigadier with his eye patch. This must have been so much fun to film, and I think you can see it in the lie of the land that Pearl Mackie, who plays Bill, is having so much more fun in this, and gets to, like, she's kind of flat. Her character's kind of flat in the pyramid.
Literally with her, if you look at her hair.
Yeah, and and her hair's gone all sorts of Princess Leia in the second episode, and she has some amazing scenes, and she's so much more vibrant in the second episode, which is kind of ironic because everyone has donned their dystopian tunics. We're all wearing in this monk's fascist Britain. We're all wearing like the most dystopian gear you can imagine.
Everybody's wearing gray or black, black or very, very dark gray.
Yeah,
those are the only two colors in the monk's world.
That's what they all want us to wear, I guess.
At least the fascist police get some red.
Yeah,
that's like the one bit. Even the doctor's outfit. I mean, it's his. It's funny. It's his more traditional, original Capaldi magician outfit, but it's a little run down. It looks like he's been wearing it for 6 months straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that, and I thought that was a specific dystopian thing, but no. Then I went back to Extremis, and he's wearing the same outfit in that. So maybe the monks predicted in Extremis that he was going to wear it. By the way, can I just, before, mentioning Extremis again reminds me that the whole point of Extremis was it was the monks running a simulation of Earth to find out what destroys Earth. Like, what leverage can they hold over us in a bulletin of atomic scientists doomsday clock kind of way. But surely the fact that parts of the simulation become self-aware and are killing themselves would mess up the entire simulation, so the monks don't actually know. Like, if it all turns on a pair of reading glasses, in one hungover guy, one lab in one part of the world, then how would the simulation have been able to predict that?
Yeah.
Especially if we were all self-aware in the simulation, we're messing it all up. Like, it
doesn't
feels
quite
like,
work, and it's also never made explicit. Are the monks time travelers? Like, I don't think they are. So I guess you could make the case in Extremis that once the simulation gets to present day, maybe things sort of start to go awry. So that could explain the people figuring it out and checking out of it. My thing is, like, to rewind to Lie of the Land for a minute, like when they all go to the central computer and they're grabbing the strands and seeing the dead planet Earth, like couldn't they have found out that way? Like, just grab one of those strands and try to find out. And they sort of recoil because I guess they can't handle the sight of the dead planet. And I think it's one of the better scenes in Lie of the Land, actually, is when the doctor's like, "Oh yeah, whatever, not my first dead planet." Which, by the way, I thought could be a reference to either The Dead Planet, which is like the first Dalek episode, or Planet of the Dead. Both with Dead Planet in the title.
He's seen a lot of dead planets, man.
So like the simulation thing, I don't know if this idea, like it's hard to buy, right? Like that the lab was the one spot, the super weak spot, unless you reckon that it's the weak spot right now, like, as opposed to, like, the doctor I think maybe exaggerates a bit, like all of human history, when was the weakest spot? Well, it's like it has to be the weak spot today, because unless the monks are explicitly time travelers, like what else are you going to work with? Yeah,
totally. It just there are so many, like, we haven't even got time to talk about all the plot holes, but like the sonic sunglasses, the doctor's supposed to be blind. We've barely mentioned that.
Right. Well, at least
but the sonic sunglasses can render the age and weight of everyone that he sees, but not the actual visible, thing.
Right.
The fact that he can't get out of the, he's in the lab and he's managed to set a bomb with a timer somehow. But then he can't see, so he can see the numbers on the timer, but he can't see the numbers on the combination lock to get out, which is why Bill.
If you think about it, like, what exactly is he seeing? right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, are we like, is he like Geordi in Star Trek, and he has these little knobs on his temples that process
Yeah.
visual information? And if so, why couldn't he process more accurate visual information? Right? Like, yeah, very very weird. And it's a bit like you might wonder why the Doctor didn't go for better cybernetic sight technology. Being a guy who probably has access to any technology anywhere, like,
Yeah.
why not just get better cameras? So, yeah, it's never really clear like how his sonic sunglasses are transmitting that to his brain. Um,
And couldn't they just transmit video of the lock to Bill? Because obviously he's in
there you go.
Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connection with her. And then she could help him. It's just
Speaking
so
of
many.
technology, so when they have their headphones on in the lie of the land,
Yeah.
and they're all playing like a Walkman, like a literal cassette tape.
Yeah.
Like speaking of dystopia, like I wasn't sure what they were trying to signal there. Like, so in Monk World, they've regressed technologically, like, and
Yeah,
like,
it's super
the
weird.
iPod was never invented, and CDs, and like what, like.
So to set the scene, they have to go into the monks' pyramid, which, again, by the way, why are they traveling around the galaxy in a pyramid? That's never explained. Why did they land it in the middle of London? Just to squash everything next to St. Paul's Cathedral. Anyway, they go into the pyramid, and it's the center. It's fake news central, so they have to. The closer they get to it, the more it is transmitting, fake memories of the monks having always been there, and them loving the monks and so forth. So that's why they have to wear the Walkman, set up with headphones, with the tape of Bill saying over and over, "The monks are not our friends." But yeah, why Walkmans?
Right.
Couldn't the Doctor have jerry-rigged something together with some Bluetooth headphone connection with one central transmitter to avoid what actually happens where one of the Walkmans gets shot or fried or whatever, and then one guy can't actually hear this counteracting information, so he goes rogue and tries to shoot the Doctor.
Yeah, it's all like plot-wise. I mean, it's fine, and I think it kind of works actually. But I just find it like such an odd choice. Like it's just anachronistic, and like this is 2017, right? Like AirPods, I think, are still new, but like the idea of like a cassette player, like really, like 30 years after it was like last probably used, like in a widespread way, like.
And again,
very,
with
very strange.
a little bit more dialogue, with a little bit more explanation, it might have worked. Like, they find a box with them in, and this is the only thing they can find. But the whole thing is strange. The Doctor is held prisoner, but they managed to break him out quite easily.
How did you like that, by the way? How did you like sort of semi-fascist overseer Doctor turned on, joining the monks? Were you fooled at all, even in the moment?
Yeah, ish. I mean, you definitely feel what Bill feels, which is like, oh my god, you too, Doctor. And I could definitely, watching that scene, I think both times I've watched it, you sort of put yourself back into the mind of watching Doctor Who as a kid, where as a kid you would watch that and you'd be totally taken in. You're like, no, the Doctor's gone evil. No, you're not supposed to say that. But I think Capaldi sells it really well. What really annoys me about that scene, and has annoyed me both times, is the fake regeneration.
Okay.
So, he makes it so that Bill, it's a big test for Bill, as it turns out. By the way, I love the reference to the monster under the Thames, and she deliberately makes it the monster under the Seine. I thought that was a nice callback to a previous episode from earlier in the season. And then he's like, no, that was a signal, by the way. Like he betrays even that. Oh my god. And then she shoots him, and he fakes his own regeneration. And to me, and then he turns it off, and he's like, congratulations everyone, and you passed the test, Bill. To me, this was just so obvious an attempt to do it for the trailer.
Right.
because we were
Right.
all watching that. It was in the trailer for the season as a whole. We're like, what? Capaldi regenerates? Because we knew he was leaving the show. I think it
Right.
was widely known at this time that he was leaving the show. So that feels like an extremely Moffat-y touch to give us a fake regeneration so we can all have our little headcanon and theories about it. And then he can point and laugh at us when it turns out to not be a regeneration after all.
Yeah, and I guess maybe, I mean, I don't think I was keeping up too much with, I mean, I knew he was leaving, I guess, but if in the moment, even if you're a fan and you're not really buying the Doctor act, like maybe you're thinking like, oh, this is how he gets out of it, he regenerates, and then the next actor, reboots his mind or something. See, I got to be honest, I was never really fooled, and not even really ish. Like, you kind of, like, it's never really quite set up in a sophisticated enough way to get you to be convincing, I think. I totally agree with you on the regeneration, by the way, because it brings up a whole host of questions. Can he just create that energy effect whenever he wants? I think he's kind of done it here and there.
He's never done it as a fake out. He did it to give Davros in The Witch is Familiar.
Right.
He gives Davros a little bit of regeneration energy. But it's always real regeneration energy, right? This is not something that he can... If he could just put it on as a fireworks show, why hasn't he done that before?
Well,
Late nights in the TARDIS, everyone's bored, there's nothing on TV. It's just... the Doctor can put on a show.
Yeah.
Everyone could go, ooh and ah.
Yeah, I know. And I feel like you kind of have to establish better rules on like what counts as a regeneration or not. And it wasn't until I think Smith regenerated that they finally said, "Oh, the second tenant counted."
Yeah,
that's once, which was
yes.
good.
And Moffat in fact told us that when we had the whole issue in The Time of the Doctor, the very end of Matt Smith's reign.
Right. That's what I'm talking
that
about.
It turns out that he's actually at the end of his 12 regeneration cycle, and we were all
Surprise!
thinking, we were all thinking he's on 11 regenerations, and Moffat would say in interviews, count the regenerations as something you'd missed, and what he meant was, was David Tennant being able to throw his regeneration energy when he gets shot by a Dalek into his hand, creating a second David Tennant. So, yeah, if you're going to have the rules that was a regeneration, according to Moffat, and then Moffat turns around and is like, no, regeneration is just, it's not regeneration, it's pretend fireworks. It's just internally inconsistent, and it's maddening.
Yeah, and so with the whole does the Doctor turn evil or whatever, I wasn't really fooled. And the thing I thought about afterward was actually the show Angel. And I don't know if you've been a fan of Buffy or Angel, but I felt like the second season of Angel, where Angel kind of goes dark. He doesn't quite join the bad guys, but he adopts a more militant stance against them and loses himself, right? Which I thought... That's kind of a much better, more sophisticated and convincing, because he really does, like, sort of go dark version of the hero, like, kind of going evil. And I would love to see that, or some version of that with the Doctor. Again, I feel like I'm getting a little beyond the scope, because I agree with you. If you think about it as a kid show, and this is for kids, it's like, okay, that's kind of cool and kind of works, and it's probably a bit memorable for kids, but I kind of want a little more meat to it, and I really wouldn't mind if Doctor Who went in that direction sometime. Of like, what would it mean for a not necessarily black or dark Doctor, but at least someone who's gray.
Yeah, and this would have been a perfect opportunity to explore it. And again, we have the main problem with the entire Moffat era, which is you're just burning through ideas. You're burning through great ideas so fast that A, we don't buy them because you're not fleshing them out, and B, they would have made great the whole entire stories on their own. And if it was an American show with 24 episodes a season, you might have more time, but at least don't burn through. Pick and choose your great Doctor Who ideas and really flesh them out. And maybe I wasn't necessarily fooled by the Doctor, quote unquote, turning evil, but I thought maybe it was something to do with the fact that soldiers were in the room, or he was playing a part and it kind of got to him. That's interesting psychology to play with.
Yeah.
If you play a role for long enough, do you become that guy?
Right.
So there's so many directions to go with it, and it just ends up being a joke, and then the Doctor,
big nothing burger.
Yeah, and the Doctor could have broken out at any time.
Yeah, well, that too, and you're so right about this even though it's 3 episodes long, and given what we've said about the monks, probably shouldn't have been longer. What they're trying to do here should have been like a season-long arc, right? And it should have been rewritten with a better monster and really flesh out these themes, and also just provide a better story. Because as soon as there's the reveal that he's actually not bad and Bill's okay, okay, what are we doing? Oh, let's just go straight to the pyramid and attack. And it's why did you spend 6 months earning the trust of the monks if your immediate play is to just blow your cover and dive right into the bad guy's headquarters? I'm that's just bizarre. What?
Yeah. At least show us all they show is with Bill's voiceover, we see them make their way back to Bristol, the Doctor's professor, and they're just sort of hiding right under the nose of the monks, which doesn't suggest that their fascist superstate with fascist soldiers everywhere is working very efficiently if the Doctor can just do an end run around that. So we need at least one scene or 2 scenes to give us the sense that the Doctor is very good at evading detection.
Yeah.
We should talk about Nardole, who we haven't mentioned at all in this episode, which is kind of a problem with Nardole in general, that he doesn't always have a whole lot to do. He's kind of the comic relief.
Exactly.
He almost dies in the pyramid, by the way, because the Doctor got him some cut-priced lungs, and he almost dies of the bacteria that the scientists accidentally created.
They never quite confirm he's a cyborg, but I think it's kind of clear since he was beheaded even before this. And Nardole's fun. I like Nardole. He's effective comic relief. But yeah, it's unfortunate. It is the overall problem with him. You never really get at him and what he cares about, why he's even sort of hanging out with the Doctor now.
But he does get his one moment in The Lie of the Land, which is he gets to do the Tarovian neck pinch.
Right.
To take out the Doctor take out the soldier who was going to shoot the Doctor because his Walkman was destroyed. Nardole comes up behind him with the old trope of conveniently timed attack from behind, does the neck pinch, and he goes down. And he gets to say this whole thing about, I learned this Tarovian neck pinch, and I can do it with this hand. I can't do it with this hand. Which is good because if we weren't a new podcast and we had letters and emails, we would probably have gotten emails last week about the fact that we didn't mention Venusian Aikido. Which is because Inferno is the first episode in which this famous sort of space-sounding martial art is mentioned by Pertwee. It shows up again later in the Pertwee era.
Oh, many times, yes.
But it is on this first outing, it is taught. It is mentioned as Venusian karate.
Right.
Which is interesting because Barry Letts would always talk about, I was looking for something peaceful, a peaceful martial art for the Doctor to use, so I chose Aikido because it's entirely defensive moves. Well, that's sort of a smoothing down of history. Speaking of fake news and fake history, Barry, because it was introduced as karate, which is not an entirely defensive martial art.
No. Even though, as much as the Karate Kid movies would like us to believe otherwise. But yeah, I feel like maybe here's my suspicion. Okay, and just this is a little Inferno interlude to keep going with it. Is that Pertwee might have heard what he this might have been like a improvisation from Pertwee, because he might have heard Aikido. It might have even been scripted that way, but I don't think people really knew about it at all. It just sounded like a weird sort of name, and he thought like, oh, we need to ground that into something better. I know what karate is. I'm just going to say karate. And given what I've heard in terms of stories about Pertwee and the lines he changed and stole, like it famously stole Sarah's line in The Five Doctors because he thought it sounded better. That feels like, I'm kind of making it up, but it feels like that it might have been just a Pertwee, like, okay, I'm just going to call it Venusian karate because I know what karate is, and I'm just going to go with it.
That makes sense. I'll buy that. But yeah, the Tarovian neck pinch, and he gets to say he's a brown belt in it. But it's not even a reference to Who's own history. It's apparently a reference to the Vulcan neck pinch, because the next thing he says, okay, trek on.
Oh, Nardole.
Yeah.
Speaking of, it's not a Nardole moment, but a moment of it with another character who is delightful, Missy. In this episode, I think honestly, the best scenes are when Michelle Gomez is on screen, because she's delightful. She calls Nardole an egg at one point, but all of her lines are just like, I mean, it's obviously like this is Moffat dialogue, at its finest. He's clearly like very on writing for Michelle Gomez and the Missy, because she even references like Celebrity Love Island at one point when she talks about how Bill. If they wanted to stop the monk's plan, they would have to turn her into a husk, and she couldn't even get on Celebrity Love Island.
Yes,
being brain dead, which was kind of fun.
So Moffat-y and so perfect for Michelle Gomez. And then, as one of the things she asks for in return with helping out with the monks is a pony, and I really hope that Missy got her pony.
Well, and I also think like in terms of like the points this series is making about anything. I feel like Missy has the best one, where she talks about how, he just says, well, kill the anchor, who is Bill, and then the monks are weakened and you can get rid of them. The doctor refuses to do that. And she's like, well, look, you have your version of good. I get what you're trying to do with me, but your good is one version of good, and what I propose is actually pretty good. So, and if you're expecting me to be you, that's never going to happen. And that was actually, I thought, very powerful, in terms of her point.
That was a good line. That was, I love it when Doctor Who gets ambiguous about the Doctor's role. The fact that he does just, swan into all these situations and sometimes makes things worse. And his companions, often end up the worse for having travelled with him. And he abandons them and forgets them. That is the best of Who to me, when it actually deals with the complexity of the Doctor's characters. This definitely works with that, and the complexity of the Master / Missy. The fact that she's remembering all the people she killed.
Oh yeah, which honestly, to me, again, the most memorable scene of the episode, which has kind of nothing to do with the episode, right? This is more about the broader arc of Missy and the Doctor, and to some extent the season. But yeah, when she's crying for the people she's killed. And just telling him you didn't tell me about this, and he's trying to sort of reassure her that this is good, this is worth it. We just got to get through it. Really,
he's
really
taking the
stuff.
Missy through therapy. He's basically Missy's therapist in this, which is nice. I wish we'd seen more of that.
Yeah, throughout. But to get to the end of the episode proper. To me, this is honestly I feel like in some ways it's the weakest part. It wasn't terrible, but this idea that Bill's the image of her mother in her head, which the Doctor enabled by showing her those photos, because being a time traveler, he's able to do that. It's just this one pure image that defeats the monks. And my problem with this is that this is it's such a repetitive climax in Doctor Who and New Who, particularly in Moffat's era, that it's really become so tiresome and predictable, and just it's really kind of almost glossing over the end. If you think about the end of the Rings of Akaten, right? There's the leaf from Clara that sort of defeats that god. There's the tears from Clara and the snowmen that defeat the great intelligence and all that. There's the mother in the Doctor, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. When she journeys back to Earth, she has to think of love and all this. I'm not trying to be too hard on this, because this is in some senses like Doctor Who at its best, right? When it does this romanticism conquering evil. I mean, I get that that's the show and that's what it's about, and I'm not against that. I just feel like when you repeatedly do this without enough setup, without enough like earning of it, as I've said before about Moffat, it just feels like you're just pulling out the trope, and at some point you're just like, okay, come on, like I defeated the villain with tears and love again. I want to get to a point where honestly, like, that doesn't work. Like, I would love to see an episode where like I'm at that point where I want to see that twist. Oh, we have all the stuff set up to defeat the enemy with love, and it doesn't work, and we got to do something else. That would be refreshing.
Yeah, that would be much more appropriate for our era, I think. I think number of things occur as a response to that. First of all, I think in Britain this would be seen as the Hollywoodization of Doctor Who, because it feels like a much more Hollywood ending to defeat things with love. Secondly, I think it's sort of a problem with the format of New Who stories that you have to kind of, because it's so single episodic or double episodic, you have to wrap things up very quickly, and how else are you going to do it? But with this sort of schmaltzy, tears of love, leaf of love, image of my dead mother kind of situation, you got to wrap stuff up quickly, and it was definitely a strength of the old series that you didn't have a lot of those kinds of endings. There were, you set up a longer game in terms of defeating your villains, and didn't have to wrap things up in the final 5 minutes. I think you're absolutely right, and especially in the modern era where things, morality is so complex now that we need more complex endings. We need to play against type. We need to upend expectations. And to that point, speaking of Doctor Who in the modern era, it's kind of fascinating the whole fake news central thing, the gaslighting, is a word that isn't used in Lie of the Land, but it is what the Lie of the Land is. It is political gaslighting. And it's kind of fascinating that this is a show that was filmed before Trump even became president. And it kind of accurately predicts what the entire Trump presidency would be about. Now, it's not like none of us could guess this is how the Trump presidency would go. In fact, you may remember, Pete, when we were both at Mashable, I wrote a couple of stories in 2016 saying, hey, America, you may be sleepwalking into a Trump presidency.
Yeah,
I will always remember you messaged me on Slack the day after the election when we were all in shock. And you said, well, I guess the sleepwalk is over.
Yeah, I did. I completely forgot about that until you just said it right now. Yeah, I did. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, like you called it, my friend.
Yep, and so, yeah, we could definitely see that. But we didn't necessarily think that it would be so, the entire presidency would be about gaslighting. Right from the start, right from the talk of, how many... how large was this crowd at the inauguration, right? Like the very first act of the presidency was gaslighting, and saying the media got it wrong, and talking about fake news, and effectively using this term fake news, which was kind of, at the time that this was filmed, it was used to refer to the sort of more unsavory, like Facebook posts and everything that had been going around about Trump. Like, I remember there was one story going around which turned out to be written by this, farm of fake journalists in Macedonia, right, about, the Pope supports Trump, Denzel Washington supports Trump.
Right.
Like, that's what fake news was. And Trump, with his expert jujitsu, kind of just turned that around on the media, the Lugan press, the lying press, the fake media, fake news. So expertly. And this precedes all of that. So it's kind of like, it's almost Doctor Who predicting the world that we were entering, and that gaslighting would become a central feature of it.
Yeah, you're probably giving them a little too much credit in terms of what they were doing. But I see your point. There's like, I don't mean to take a political stance either way. I know in response to what you would say, and I'm not saying this, but I know a lot of people would say there's a gaslighting that has emerged in response to Trump as well. And it's kind of hard to know where you stand in the middle of things sometimes with two factions constantly trying to, and honestly on many issues even more. And to have I would actually love to see a Doctor Who episode that looks at the political and communications apparatuses involving, media, big tech, politics, and unpack those a little more with respect to like who to believe, who's in control, and what are the tools behind that. And I think they do that to some extent. I think there was a little bit of that in Whittaker's season with Spyfall.
Yeah.
That had a little commentary on Google. I mean, they touch on it, but I would really like to see the idea of this episode. And I don't necessarily want another jackbooted fascist regime thing happening, but I would like to see, what you might think of as like kind fascism, right? Like the idea, almost like The Circle. If you've read that book, which is had a terrible movie made around it, but the book itself is quite compelling in how it explains how tech can facilitate a bit of a surveillance state and
that one that we've all voluntarily agreed to, which is kind of this situation with Facebook.
Exactly, and like I like it when sci-fi comments on this. I remember early on in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., a show I never ended up keeping up with that much, but there's like, well, I know what they're trying to figure out what happens in something that happened in a subway in Germany or someplace, and he's like, well, I know the first thing what I would do if I saw something weird, Instagram, and they all go like look at the social media networks, and they make a commentary like this part of the job gets easier every year. Like people just keep putting stuff out there, and it's you just see it.
I love it.
So it's like the interesting little tidbit of commentary on the surveillance state that just has emerged voluntarily.
Science fiction in general is having a hard time kind of catching up with our social media world, and one way it's done effectively is, this trope that has started. I think it started with Sherlock, of like texts will appear on the screen, and you just sort of explain a lot of the plot that way. That's kind of nice. I think we're why not show Instagrams on the screen or Facebook posts or something. Yeah. Like that, we're going to have to develop a new language to talk about this new world that we're in. And Doctor Who could be a big part of that. I will say, in closing on the gaslighting thing, that one of my favourite parts of Lie of the Land is right at the beginning, where we get, again, it's sort of a very, cliched scene of a fascist Britain almost, where a family's watching TV, they're watching the Doctor talking about how great the monks are, then the doors get kicked in and Mom gets carried away because it turns out that she was distributing, anti-monk literature. And I just love that she is arrested under I think it's the False Memories Act of 1975.
Right, yeah.
Which is in itself a false act, right? I just love that. That's so clever and has so many layers within itself.
Yeah.
That speaks to gaslighting on its own. I'd love to see more of that, and with more of that, this episode might even have worked.
Well, it worked temporarily for the monks, so we don't quite have to do the "what if the evil plot had succeeded" part.
Yeah.
We saw it succeed. I guess you could sort of say like, well, what if it had succeeded for all time? And I guess we just see more of. Like the Earth would become a fascist part of the monks' empire, sort of fueling it and helping them spread to other planets. And it would be interesting to see how they cope on Skaro or Telos.
Yeah. Yes. How do you gaslight Daleks?
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to see. Actually, you bring up an interesting point, which is Missy says that it has to, they forge a psychic link with the person who consented, which is Bill, and then it gets passed on through the bloodline.
Right.
Which is. First of all, let's not talk about bloodlines, Doctor Who. Come on. Secondly,
what do you mean? Why? What does that mean?
Oh God, it's an issue that I know from Star Wars fandom. Like, there's too much talk of the Skywalker bloodline and the Force being in the
how
blood.
many chlorians you get? Yeah.
Yes, and Palpatine. Rey being a granddaughter of Palpatine. There's an issue of like, Star Wars is ultimately all about bloodlines. But secondly, what if Bill just refuses to have children?
Right.
It's not a given.
Well, you'd also think they would pay more attention to her, not to go back to the story, whatever. But like they'd probably monitor her a little more closely.
Yeah. They'd maybe know if Nardole broke into her flat, or if she ended up, going on a ship to the Doctor's prison hulk. Yeah. Oh, reason 100 why this story just doesn't meet the suspension of disbelief line. Oh,
so
all right.
Anyway, what's your bottom line on this one? I think we're both kind of on the Dalek versus Ogron. We're probably in an Ogron. It's definitely an Ogron for me. It didn't really work on many levels, despite some nice moments from Missy.
It's an Ogron and a half for me. But you know what? I'm so glad that we've found so much talk about it, because my fear when we set up this sort of random, this decision to go through all of Doctor Who randomly, my first fear was that we were going to go to something like Fear Her, which is one of my least favourite episodes of Doctor Who. I was like, what happens when we do that? What happens when we get to the really bad episodes? And, you may remember my groan in the last episode of Pull to Open when we ended up here, because I was like, oh, this is my nightmare come true. This is just a bad episode. But I like that this is proof that we've got a lot to talk about, and it's sort of in dissecting it. Like I've made my peace with it, and we've found a lot to talk about, and we've gotten into a really deep discussion of what Doctor Who is and what it could be, and I like that. And it reminds me of what Stephen King says about, I may have mentioned this before, his line about how to learn how to be a novelist, which is that you learn a lot more from bad novels than from good ones. Because the question of why something doesn't work is almost more interesting than the question of why something does work.
And that is why the whole critic industry exists. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I loved a lot of the discussions we've had. And if there's anything that I would consent to love out of love, it is Doctor Who. So this is, we're seeing the fruits of it. Speaking of the randomizer and jumping around, shall we embark on our next journey?
We shall. And once again, for the benefit of new listeners, we use random.org, which uses atmospheric noise to give you a real random number, not a fake computerized algorithmic random number, which just guesses at randomness.
And we have organized every Doctor Who story into a single spreadsheet.
Yep.
There are 297 by our count in terms of stories that have been televised. There's obviously everything that's been televised. And we pick a random number between 1 and 297.
Yep.
And, or actually, should we... No, it's 298, right? Because I think we got to fix this spreadsheet, right? Because we've been going by the numbers on the spreadsheet, but... Yes.
Unearthly
actually,
Child is
line
number 2.
1 is just the table heading. So we're going to fix that. So maybe after this week.
Yeah, we'll fix the numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell you how I'd be doing it is random.org. You enter a min number and a max number, and I've just been doing min to max 298.
Oh, cool.
Okay,
well then that works too. Yeah, so we're fine. I thought for a second we were fundamentally flawed, but you've actually been starting at 2, so we're good.
Yeah, if we get a decimal point at the wrong place, we're going to blow up the world. So no, we're not doing that. But right. I should also say, and this is going to happen this week for the first time. At some point, we're going to hit a number that we've hit on before, in which case you just roll again, right? Yeah,
that until such time as we've that starts happening all the time, we might need to rethink. But I think we've got a good long while before that we have that problem. So
I love it. At some point we should calculate how many weeks this is going to take us to watch all of Doctor Who, because at 298 this is that's many years.
Yeah, well, at some point we'll be able to just compress it all into some kind of AR experience while we're walking around. So I'm sure we'll be able to get GP. What's the thing that writes things? GPT-3, and we can it'll be GPT-12 that'll just do the podcast for us.
Oh my god, I can't wait to listen to that. All right, so how we do is that I've got the numbers, you've got the spreadsheet. I'm doing this blind.
All right.
So there's no favoritism. I'm going to hit the generate button, and I'm genuinely afraid of where the randomizer is going to
You've
take us
You've already
next.
jinxed it with Fear Her, but we'll see. We'll see.
I
What
know.
happens.
That's what it's going to be. It's going to be Fear Her, or it's going to be Extremis.
Oh my god. Let's see what happens. Shall we
All
roll
right.
it?
I'm ready to roll. Hit generate, and
Don't blink.
125.
25. It is. Oh my god! It's modern undead.
No
It
way!
is.
Oh my god!
We're back with Davison.
Seriously?
There's so many doctors we haven't hit yet, and we're back with Davison. Now, this is wow. This is so weird and uncanny. Okay, so not only is it Davison, which, as you know, is my doctor. I started with Davison. It's the first episode I saw with Dave. This is my genesis of Doctor Who fandom.
That's
This is
insanely
it.
creepy.
It's modern undead,
And it's a Brigadier episode.
and it's a Brigadier episode,
And it's a Turlo episode.
and it's a Turlo episode. My God.
As far as the randomizer is concerned, the Brigadier and Turlo are pretty much the only companions in Doctor Who
apparently.
history. Like,
Wow,
they're everywhere.
This is so eerie. This is the randomizer is so not random. I mean, it's
The Doctor's trying to send us a message. Yeah,
Clearly.
Mordred Undead was not my first Doctor Who, but it was certainly one of the creepiest that I remember from childhood, and I remember missing one of the episodes, and kind of coming into it with, I think maybe I missed the first episode. I came into it thinking that the Doctor had regenerated, right? Because there's that weird thing where they think it's the Doctor. Anyway, we'll get
it's
to
another
that.
fake regeneration.
Yeah.
know,
Oh my God!
Look at this.
Yeah.
There are some very strange patterns emerging from the randomizer where it's taking us. Wow.
And it gets us into the whole 1970s, 1980s thing.
Chris, in a week,
dealt with.
we're going to be standing in front of a cork board with strings and pictures and newspaper clippings, and we're going to be like, what's the randomizer trying to tell us?
Yes, lots of pictures of the Brigadier in as many different versions.
Is this mustache real or not?
Oh my God, I love it. Well,
Okay.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's going to be a great journey. This has been great. Good commentary on a So-So episode. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This is Pull to Open. Again, we are a podcast. Please subscribe to the program if you have not yet. We are available wherever you find great podcasts. And please leave us a review. Be like Jana. Jana is so smart and kind and cool and really, really good looking. She left us a review. Why don't you do that as well?
And we'll read it out on air, and we will thank you profusely.
Mm-hmm, and you'll be guaranteed some swag whenever we start making swag. Follow us on the socials. We are all on TikTok, first and foremost, at Pull to Open. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at Pull to Open 63. Please follow. Give us a like or two if you like the stuff you see, and why don't you leave us a comment? We'll comment back.
Yeah, and I might even do some live tweeting on the Twitter account when I watch Mordred Undead and follow along with that. So please follow us, Pulled Open 63 on Twitter.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited about that one.
I'm Future Boy on Twitter. You're Pete Michelle on Twitter, and we will be back here in 2 weeks' time, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
All right. Good talking to you, Chris, and we will talk to you again very soon.